Ladies and gentlemen, Kirk Thatcher and Darren Doctorman, the Weirded Beardos. Oh, it's you. Welcome.
Hi, kids.
Kirk's opening is mainly visual this week.
Everything I do is mainly visual. It's not auditory.
Right, or oral.
Let's do a podcast for the hearing impaired.
You're Oral Roberts.
But I'm as told his brother.
Anal.
Yeah, we all did that joke when we were 5.
Well,
Hi, everybody.
Howdy. Welcome to
back
another...
to season 2, episode 3.
We're not season 2. We're
2.
still season 1. We're
This
just
is seasoning.
We're just the
still well seasoned.
The first season annex.
Annex.
Yeah.
I dated Annex.
You know, like on Enterprise, the Annex 01.
Oh,
that's a
There's
funny,
Charlie X
funny
and his
joke.
sister.
Oh,
Charlie's ex's sister, Annex.
Annex.
I hung
So
out with
yeah, how's your week been?
Well, work is good. I'm directing my last episode of season 2. It is the last episode of season 2, and it's my last episode of season 2, which is kind of amazing. So in 2.5, well, I would say the show's been running for about 3 years. I've been on it for about 2.5 years. We've cranked out. Now again, they're not finished. I'm finished. I will be finished directing by about 6-7 weeks.
Wow.
But then it has to be boarded and animated and all that. So
yeah.
But so I would say,
and then they have to bring you back to say, "Oh, this is not what I wanted at all."
Terrible. Could you make this work? Make sense? Yeah. I'm like, it's not my job, man. So I would say in 4 years we'll have done 40 episodes, which is pretty amazing. Basically, 10 episodes a year of 22-minute shows. So it's a lot, but it's going to air October. I don't know when this is airing, but October 30th, 2024. They're going to launch the series called Max and the Midnights.
That'll be, I think, 3 weeks after this one.
Okay, so if you're listening and you have kids, I think this is my opinion. When I came on, it was like Game of Thrones meets Monty Python for kids in a medieval fantasy kind of adventure comedy show. I tried to bring as much Python as possible. There's some really good writing. There's fun. It's a fun action adventure thing. It's really a good mix of action and humor and heart. For me, I think it's going to be a hit with 10-year-olds. I would love it to be a hit with stoners and college kids like SpongeBob. Right. I don't know if it's silly enough. I think it'll be a runaway hit with the audience it's intended for on Nickelodeon. Right. Probably 8 to 12. It looks amazing. Everyone has seen it, even not a kid. I guess. Well, so they've launched the first 2 episodes on Nickelodeon's YouTube channel, and without any noise
fanfare
at all,
or anything.
Nothing, no promotions, just to kind of get a read on it. So they've 30,000 views or something. So a couple kids, who have their little podcasts, have really loved it, and it does look amazing. I will say, for TV animation, it's pretty awesome. I mean, it's up there with Prodigy and some of the other shows that really use. I think we're using Unreal Engine,
right,
which is kind of amazing. So that's what I've been up to, and then outside of that, I just demoed a 8x10 or 10x12 garden shed in my backyard. That was my Saturday. And I've got a big scar in my arm to prove it.
Nice.
Yeah, that's from a nail that wasn't rusty. Thank goodness.
You're a real man now.
I'm very manly. My voice dropped and my pants had to be taken out because of my manliness. It is true. Okay, let's talk about this. Whenever you do, I don't know if you ever fix a pipe or any kind of thing that isn't sitting and writing or sitting and drawing that's considered quote unquote manly or a man's job. Yeah. I always feel like, man, I could go eat a cow. I can rope a horse. I feel so proud of myself.
You could grope a horse?
I could grope a horse and the horse would thank me afterwards. Rope a horse, you bastard. I always feel very I am man.
I feel like that if I change a light bulb, for crying out loud.
Anytime I get, I have calluses, I have cuts and scratches, and I'm like, you know what? I've done my Neanderthal ancestors proud. Give me a club, I'll go knock out a deer and make dinner. So that was my Saturday, and then today was all socializing. I hung out with some Tiki Explorer people, Adventureland fans, and
Nice.
friends at my local Tiki bar that I love, and then was like at a small wine and snack gathering at a dear friend's house. She's a writer on she was a writer on Prodigy. She wrote on a bunch of Star Wars animated stuff, and then
Mm-hmm.
Todd Stashwick was there, who's a good friend and a great, Stashy, and Bobak Ferdowski's girlfriend, who I know Bobak
Mm-hmm.
casually, but we were both, he's a punk in the real sci-fi or the real science world. I was a
Right.
punk in the sci-fi world. So we connected that way. So I haven't seen him in years, but met his girlfriend.
Bobak
So
used to do our Starship Smackdown at San Diego.
Bobak did?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. I know that he loves sci-fi. And he's great.
No, he's a good guy.
We've texted, but we've never met in person. Well, actually, so here's a short story. I was at Huntington Gardens, which is a beautiful private residence that's a garden. You can go, I think you spent like $30 to go and tour. It's amazing. It was an old railroad barons. It's acreage in the middle of Pasadena. If you're ever in LA, it's a great botanical gardens, and there's a house with all this amazing paintings and art in it. So I was there and walking around the gardens, and I see a group of like 5 people walking down a path towards me, and I'm walking the other way. And I pass somebody, and he's got the mohawk, and I'm like,
hey, wait a minute.
That looks like, because we texted before on Twitter, and literally 5 minutes later, my phone pings, and it's Bobak saying, hey, are you at Huntington Gardens? I'm like, oh my God, yes. We weren't able to meet up there. But anyway, so we keep getting closer to actually hanging out. So
odd.
He's amazing. I wanted to bring, the reason I originally contacted him years ago was to bring him on as a science advisor, but on camera for a kids show, talking about space exploration and science. Actually, Jeff Bezos was going to produce, or his company was going to produce it through, what's his name, Blue Origin, was going to do it for Amazon, and I wanted both, and they're like, yeah, but he's great because he's cool and he's got a mohawk, and he was going to be a science advisor and an on-camera personality, and he was down, and we were just literally, that was it. I said, you're just like, yeah, that sounds great, and the whole thing blew up because of COVID. Actually never happened, but so that was my weekend and week. How was yours, Darren?
My week was fine. It's
working with the Roddenberries.
Working with the Roddenberries and making the berries, picking the berries, and
putting them on the rods,
fermenting them,
putting them on the rods to make the Roddenberries.
No, it's great because the team that we have working on the Roddenberry archive is immensely talented and bright, and
Holly is one of them.
And who?
Holly, who I just met.
Polly?
Holly.
Oh, no, she doesn't work for the Roddenberry archive.
Oh, that's what she said. Or is she on the Star Trek archive, not the Roddenberry archive?
Yeah.
That's it. Okay.
Yes.
Right. Yes. Well, she had a whole thing. We had a whole conversation about the 3-foot Enterprise and the whole thing that's going through, the model and all that. Actually, this party was funny. You could tell there was maybe 15 people there at the most. And the big argument was, which we can talk about Andor, and 2 guys, who I won't remain nameless, said that Andor was a great series, but it was not a Star Wars series. It was not, they felt it wasn't Star Wars. And I'm like, but it was. It just wasn't. And so one of them's posit was Star Wars is a genre, not a setting. Not a setting. And I said, no, I think it's a setting because there's a Star Wars universe, like there's a Marvel universe. So anyway, it was great. I just love being with nerds who passionately, we all argued our points about nerds. We argued very, very passionately that everyone agrees 100% it's a great series.
Yeah.
But is it a Star Wars, as you like to say?
Right.
And I said it was because it's in the Star Wars universe, and their argument was there isn't a Star Wars universe; it's a genre. I'm like, but that's
not true.
Yeah. Well, again, so you could join the fray. There is no wrong answer, and there's no.
Sure, there is.
It's yes. How many angels can dance on how many stormtroopers can dance on the head of a pin?
None of them. They keep falling off.
One of them. Yeah, they can't aim. How many Jedi can? Anyway. So that was literally about 45 minutes of this party, and everyone's laughing and having a good time. But
Uh-huh.
and then so everything came up. Was Mandalorian? Is Boba Fett? The book of Boba Fett is that's definitely Star
Booger
Wars.
Boba Fett.
The booger Boba Fett.
Booger Boba Fett.
So there, the gentleman who posited this first said Star Wars is a samurai western goofball comedy, and if it doesn't have those elements, it's not a Star Wars. And I'm like, well, but that's what Andor was to me. It was like going, it doesn't have to be a samurai war, goofball comedy. It can be a Star Wars universe that's a bigger Star Wars universe. So it's interesting.
Look,
And
I think what they're saying is it just doesn't have the lightsaber guys.
right, and that was it. There were no lightsabers in it. It wasn't a Jedi. It wasn't a Skywalker saga. It wasn't a Jedi. It wasn't the dark side versus the light side.
Yeah.
And I
Look,
said it was more about fascism, and which
yeah.
to me is is a
And
Star
the workings of the Empire.
right. Which was I liked that about it.
Yeah, I did too.
So, but it's the sad truth is it was the lowest rated, even under
Well,
Boba Fett,
that's true.
the
That's true.
lowest rated Star Wars series. So maybe that's it. It's just like that's not what people want from a Star Wars.
Well, people don't know what they want from a Star Wars. That's the
Well,
thing.
they know what they want after they see it. That's the problem with entertainment. You to get an executive to greenlight it, they're like, "Well, what's it like?" Well, it's not like anything else. Well,
Yeah.
I don't know if we can make it then.
It's like nothing we've ever seen before.
Yes, it's a game changer. Laser cats. It's a game changer. All right, so that was
Good.
that. Yeah, and so you had a topic you wanted to discuss this week.
Well, I was just thinking that we both have had a bunch of great mentors
Absolutely.
who have taken us under their uh, respective wings,
Yes.
and
Yes.
we know about your main two,
Right. Right.
uh, and secondary ones, of course.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I just want to talk about that because, and we also have the responsibility of paying that forward
Right.
to the generations after us,
Right.
because it's an important thing. Always in the scope of any human endeavors, you need people to guide you into
Right. I've
the realm that you're entering. Right?
tread the waters before. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's interesting in our world, as it's changing so rapidly with AI and
Yeah.
computers and all that, it's like you're saying. Like I don't know. I mean, I sort of, in terms of paying it forward. I mean, I've had amazing mentors, but it was a different world, and it worked until probably 2010, 2015,
Mm-hmm.
and then the wheels started coming off with AI and computers and all that, and just the industry changing. It's
Yeah.
not. So it's like taking your concept and moving forward. Like I don't know. The only way I mentor people is I direct with previous artists,
Right.
and I go and an editor, and I say, we need this, we need that, let's get this shot, and then the editor throws it together and go, we need this and we need that. So if I don't teach, I just more like if they learn by example,
Right.
like what's funny, what works as an action sequence and whatever. But
well, they also learn by your bad example.
well, that's more than HR thing, yeah. Don't call them idiots when they don't do it right now.
Oh.
I try to be very, very. I mean, Jim Henson in particular, but Jerry Jewell, who was Jim Henson's main writer, the guy who taught me how to write, or I worked with too. It's never teaching. It's more like, hey, let's write a Muppet script together. Let's design a thing together. Let's work on a show idea together. So it's very informal as opposed to like in more of the trades like sound editing, sound design, editing. I was talking to two editors today at one of this event I was at.
There is actual apprenticeships.
Apprenticeship. Well, there's it's like a first AD, second AD, a second assistant editor, first assistant editor, and so that's sort of codified in a bit. But it's funny. These two editors were saying these kids today come in and they're like, oh yeah, I've caught on Premiere, and after 3 months they're like, why am I not editing? And they're like, this one guy worked at Disney for 25 years and he said he's only been given 2 promotions, and he got a kid, a 29-year-old. This guy's in his late 50s, early 60s. Some 29-year-old came in as his boss because he was a lot cheaper than the guy.
Right, of course.
And the guy didn't know jack. He knew how to like push the buttons on Premiere, but didn't know how to do the job. And he said the guy was really frustrated after 3 months, complaining like, why do I have to deal with this? Like, I should be the head of the department. So, and I don't want to get into the whole boomer Gen Y, whatever, like,
Right.
kids
Right.
today, because I don't know. I don't really mentor people,
Right.
but the mentoring process, I mean, the Muppets sort of like people are like, how do I get to be a Muppet puppeteer? I said, you got to get them to hire you to be right hand. And then you work up to doing a background character. Then you work up to doing maybe, you know, again, like Frank Oz's right hand or
Yeah.
not anymore, but someone's right hand and a background character. And then you slowly, maybe you develop your own character. And it's years. It takes
Yeah.
years because also there's only like 8, 9 jobs each season. Like every
Right.
show, there's not like, oh, we need 60 new Muppets. It's not like a TV series where there's a huge cast like Game of Thrones. So it really depends on the skill set.
So did you
Like,
just say that there's a Muppet Game of Thrones coming? Is that what you said?
no, but I would love to.
That would
I
be
would love to
interesting.
do it without the Muppets. I would love to just do a puppet Game of Thrones. Actually, my friend Drew Massey did an amazing show called The Barbarian and the Troll, which was essentially a Monty Python Game of Thrones with
Hmm.
or D&D kind of world with puppets. And Nickelodeon ran it once, and the day after the last season aired, they canceled it.
Wow.
And it was great. It was hilarious. I don't know what they didn't like about it because I watched it and I was just angry that I wasn't involved because it's so funny and it looked great. It was shot
And
in
it was your
Canada.
anger that expressed itself into the universe and
Exactly.
killed it.
And I sent it out, and I was just jealous. I wanted to work on it. I was really bummed because it was shot in Canada, and half the crew were at I knew all the puppeteers,
Yeah.
and it was shot in Vancouver with a lot of the crew I'd worked with on Muppet stuff up there. And so I don't know, puppets are its own thing. I pretty much dissuade anyone from getting into puppetry. Is like, oh, this will be my career. It's just,
Yeah. No.
it's you have a better chance being. You have about the same chance as making it as a ventriloquist, I would say.
Well, there's not a lot of call for ventriloquists
Well,
now.
that's my point. There's a call for about 8 Muppeteers, and all the slots are filled by guys who aren't near death. There's maybe a
Right.
couple who are in their 70s, and I wouldn't even say they're near death, but they're probably going to retire in the next 10 years.
Right.
Everyone else is healthy and in their 40s, maybe late 30s, and so like,
And these
yeah,
are the people that you need to target and kill.
right,
What?
right. It's sort of like saying I want to be on a Star Trek series. I
Wow.
don't know. Is it like that? I guess
That's
you have a much better chance of being an actor than a puppeteer. There's just not a lot of jobs. It's the
no.
sad truth
Not a lot of jobs doing anything these days. That's the thing.
these days. Well, that's so. Getting back to your mentorship thing,
Yeah.
it seems that and the other guy who was he was an editor or producer. Sorry, he was a producer who had done editing. He said, these kids come in. I'm a director. What are you doing? Oh, I've got a shot on my iPhone. I'm like, okay.
Right.
Well, you could shoot. I mean, what was his name? 28 days later,
Yeah.
just they said they shot his latest movie on an iPhone 15.
Right.
So okay, I mean, if that's the tool doesn't make the artist. The artist uses the tool. So these kids come in and they've shot a movie or their shorts on their iPhones and they
Right.
cut it together in their in Final Cut. Can you say they're not a director and editor? No, you can't say that. They've done it,
Well,
but
the
the
thing is that
the ubiquity of it. Yeah.
the job description is not your ability to do it.
Uh-huh.
It is your ability to make choices from your experience
Right.
in solving problems that you can't foresee.
Yes. I was gonna say it's like giving someone some blocks and saying, hey, do a Jenga wall.
Right.
And they're like, yeah, I can do that. I say, okay, I'm gonna throw bowling balls at you and a
Yeah.
flamethrower, and I'm gonna throw darts at your feet,
Yeah.
and I'm gonna scream and have, cats running up and down your and trying to
Oh,
claw
and
your
you got
eyes
to be
out.
done in 15 minutes. Go.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. You're absolutely right. It's dealing with the unknown and just someone said, what's the hardest thing about directing Muppets? I said physics. It's
Yeah.
time and physics. It's just, what
And
you're
managing reality.
and and the thing is that I had to learn is managing people. It's the
Right.
politics, and I don't mean politics in the very specific way. I mean in the very social. It's the right word.
Being able to guide
Yes,
and shepherd
control.
people.
Yes, shepherd to direct without having to yell and scream and
Yeah.
bully people. And that's why a lot of directors yell and scream and bully people.
Right.
very famous ones. I didn't want to do that. I don't want to. I'd never have. I mean, I think the worst thing I'd be is maybe teasing people, but which is, I guess, a mild form of bullying.
With a little feather on a
with
rod.
with a
Like,
cattle prod.
eh,
I'm teasing you with this cattle prod, sticking it in your butt crack. Yeah,
uh,
that didn't go over well.
HR.
Puff and stuff.
Who's your
I did.
friend when things get rough?
I never used a cattle prod. It was a
No,
riding.
not the cattle prod.
It's a riding crowd. Ooh, my
What the
phone
heck
just.
was
That
that?
was
Your
my
phone just
phone.
complained.
I should have put it on silent. I apologize.
So, yeah, I mean, I look, we have heard a lot about your connection with Jim Henson and Leonard Nimoy
Yeah,
and Joe Johnston and all
all
the
those fans.
favorite people from ILM.
Yeah.
Um,
Who were your mentors?
well, I've had several along the way. Um, to a very distance connection is Jim Cameron, because
Right.
he hired me on the Abyss.
Right.
But on that, I met some great mentors that had a lot of influence on my not only my career but my life. Les Dilley, who was the production designer,
Yeah.
was also the art director on some of my absolute favorite movies in the past. He was the art director on Star Wars and Empire and
Yeah.
Raiders and Alien and Superman. I mean, all these
But
iconic movies.
he was not a production designer. He was the art director.
He was the art director, yes, on those.
Because
Uh,
Norm Reynolds was the production designer.
Norman Reynolds was the production. Well,
Yeah.
Norman Reynolds was took over on Empire Strikes Back after John Barry, the original production designer from Star Wars and Empire and Superman, died.
That's right. I forgot about John
Yeah,
Barry.
he died slightly before production
Yeah.
began on the Empire Strikes Back.
Right. That's right.
Um, but yeah, so he was an art director, and he sort of took me under his wing, and I worked with him on 5 movies after The Abyss, and he took me along and he encouraged me. And uh,
Now, what? So, mentoring is a big umbrella. Besides the specific tasks of, like, what makes a good blueprint or whatever, like, what nuggets of wisdom to give you just about, because so much of it isn't about, like you said, using the tools. It's more about the process and the
yeah,
politics. And yeah,
no, just his way of sort of dealing with all the artists that worked under him,
yeah.
and his way of sort of managing them, and letting them contribute their own
Of course.
talents to the job, and not and not trying to uh, you know take credit for everything
Right.
like some people
Right.
can do. And that was very. I found that inspiring, and the fact that he didn't take it all, horribly seriously. That
Yeah. It's
he
important.
knew that this was a creative job, but that
We're not curing cancer.
we're
Yeah.
not. Yeah, we're not curing cancer. We're not saving lives. Um, but the fact that I got to work on the first project with Ron Cobb, for uh, a couple months, and he was, you know, sort of he had always been in my mind a an icon. I've been very familiar with the work that he'd done in the past,
Absolutely.
and to be honest, his temperament and his uh, kindness was the main thing that I remember about him. We just passed over his birthday yesterday, actually, um, and he was just delightful to see him just
He,
sitting at his desk and working.
he would vacillate between, I mean, I never worked with him, but having met with him and talked with him a few times,
Hmm.
he still had the enthusiasm of a kid building a model kit,
Absolutely,
but also the cynicism of a guy. His political cartoons, like, he was an
yes,
amazing. We all. It's funny because I think about Ron Cobb and, like, how you and I are both kind of bigger guys with beards, and we've got that part of us that's still a kid who wants to make cool
yeah,
stuff, and also a guy who's been burned by an industry that can be completely heartless.
yeah,
And I met him when I was in my 20s and just starting out, and
hmm
I'd worked on Jedi, and I saw him at a convention. I was like, "Oh, I just worked on Jedi," and he was super, like you said, incredibly kind. And but finally, I also had his book, with all his old political cartoons in it,
Sure.
the
Cobb
Oscar.
again. Yeah.
Yes, and I loved his political cartoons. And anyway, he kind of grew up and became Ron Cobb. Like we're
Yeah.
a bit cynical, yet still you can't with the flame of like I want to make cool stuff, and I love I go to a movie like I just saw Deadpool and Wolverine, and it was adult and funny and
Yeah.
crazy. And I'm like, that's why I got into this
Yeah.
business, to make that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And that's he loved it. It was the same thing.
Absolutely. And
He loved animated.
I've found that I will sometimes be doing something and I will start thinking like I think he would have thought,
Oh,
you know?
nice.
And that is just it's so wonderful. I mean, I'm nowhere near the designer he was, but I'm always sort of aiming for that.
Sure.
So that's what my connection with him was.
What did you? Because what his design sense for me was always, it had a very lived in utilitarian. It wasn't the Sid Mead like perfect,
Yeah.
planes.
Yeah.
It was like no, there was hoses and dirt on the floor.
Yeah.
That, and I never talked to him about it, but working with him, was he like it had to have that sense of
He always called himself a frustrated engineer,
yeah,
and that he wanted to figure out how it would do something first
yes,
and let that process tell him
drive
what
the
it would
design.
look like. And I always thought that was an amazing way of going about
The,
that job.
the last time I met him and I met him before, but hung out with him, he was in the Bay Area
Hmm.
doing a video game about space
Yeah, he
truckers.
was working for Rocket.
Yes, Rocket
Uh,
Pictures or Rocket. Yes,
yeah,
wasn't it Trey Trip?
I don't know.
Anyway, forget the guy's name, but it was called like it was like the trucker's name, like the Ballad of Ron McCuddy or
Yeah,
whatever.
right.
And it was space truckers, and he was
Yep,
really into it. And he was super excited about the video games, and this was 1990s computer graphics,
yep,
and he was just the enthusiasm was there, and he was like, "Oh, it's cool." And he was the story. It was his story and his characters, and he was really
yep,
getting a chance to. And I don't know, it was for a like DVDO or something. It was one of those formats that kind of died early on the vine when digital was
yeah.
coming out.
Rocket science. That's what you're
Rocket
thinking of.
Science. And it was like the Legend of Bo Dean or something. It was like some space truckers thing, and he was so excited about it and
Yeah,
loved the computer technology. And it was early video game level of quality. But yeah, and he was at this place it was in Berkeley, I think, or Oakland, and it was kind of the early days of the Silicon Valley kind of tech
yeah.
vibe for entertainment, and
And he
Tony
was
put
always on the cutting edge of technology. He would
yeah,
always be using the new tools
yeah,
and experimenting in 3D and
yep,
Photoshop and all
yeah,
that sort of stuff before
yeah.
anybody was.
Jim Henson, same way, loved
Yeah,
technology and how it could move the art forward.
yeah.
Okay, so wow, that was great. You got to work with Ron
I
Cobb and you
I
let
was so
Liz Tilly,
lucky.
and
Les
who
Dilly,
else?
and on a couple movies later, I got to work with Ed Verreau, who
Oh yeah,
was
E.T.
a great designer. He started out as a storyboard artist and illustrator on Star Trek: The Motion Picture, working for Robert Abel. And but he went on to be Spielberg's
Yeah,
storyboard guy exclusively, and he was just again uh, a very uh, kind and reasonable person uh, who had these amazing credits, but he still
didn't act
would
like
sort
a
of consider me an equal for
right.
some strange reason. Uh, but
Okay.
he the greatest thing he did for me, it seems like it's a mean thing, but I met him on the fifth movie that I was working with Les Dilly, and he told Les not to hire me on the next movie because I was too connected to Les and I needed
Becoming
to
Les's
branch
guy.
out.
Yeah.
Yes, and I needed to branch out and meet more people, and that was the greatest thing
Wow.
he ever did.
Wow.
He didn't tell me at the time. He told me later,
Wow.
after I had survived this this traumatic separation.
Yeah.
But
That's wild.
I mean, that was great because he
Right.
knew the pitfalls that could happen,
Right.
and I'm still, dear friends with him.
Oh, that's
He
great.
retired a couple years ago.
Yeah.
All my all my mentors have either died or retired or gone into hiding.
All three of my main ones have died. That
Yeah,
was Jim, Leonard, and Jerry Joel. And what's
yeah,
crazy was Jim died first, and he was the
yeah,
youngest of the three. Then Jerry, and then Leonard Nimoy.
yeah.
Phil Tippett was a mentor in a
Mm,
less in his inimitable fashion.
right, because
Um,
he ran the creature shop on
around the
Jedi.
creature shop of Jedi, I'm just talking about creature design and the psychology of like, and he wasn't a professorial at all. It was like, you know, that's cool. That looks dumb.
Yeah,
I just, he was very
straightforward. Yeah,
straightforward and not super, he didn't have
precious.
a professorial. Yeah. I was like, well, we watched elephants and the way they moved. And,
Yeah,
it was kind of like, duh.
yeah.
It's not like, well, pachyderms have a certain weight mass ratio. And it was like, yeah, we went and
Look,
filmed
you
an
see
elephant.
here where the knee
Yeah.
moves slightly forward. Yeah,
Not professorial. It was more like, here's what I learned from Phil Tippett. We're talking about what you learned from a mentor.
yeah,
Just start making it.
yeah,
Don't fiddle around with drawings and thoughts and blueprints and plans.
yeah.
Just get some clay.
Don't overthink it.
Don't overthink it. Learn the physicality. Again, this was before computers.
Right.
Learn the physicality, whatever it is. If it's a 9 foot tall suit or a stop motion puppet, get some clay, get some styrofoam. Just start making it.
Yeah.
Because you will learn
Start to
more. Like,
deal with the limitations as soon as possible.
yes, and also your design. The 2D drawings look great because they can look great. I always say 2D is marketing, 3D is reality.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so because all his stuff creatures were 3D, he would just start whacking shit together.
Yeah.
And the other thing he did, so he was not precious at all. It
Right.
wasn't like, here's my drawings and here they put up on the wall. He would like have some little sketch and then just start throwing clay together. That I learned from him. The other thing, two things I learned from him was burnt umber and raw umber and raw sienna are the colors of monsters.
Right.
You could throw those a wash on those on any paint job and it'll suddenly look real. And the other thing he did, again, not by teaching me anything, just by osmosis, was whatever the creature is around the fleshy wrinkles, put in whatever their blood color is, and it gives it a reality.
Right.
Because we're used to seeing red around our nostrils and our, the corners of
Right.
our
Because
mouth,
that's
whatever.
the parts where our
The blood
skin
gets
is thinnest.
right. So, okay, so if you want to make it look real and you're going to make it flesh colored, make it red. If you want to make it look alien, and it's a green alien, then maybe make a coppery blue green
Right.
around there. But it gives it, what it does is it gets down to human psychology. And
It's a subliminal reality.
It's a subliminal reality, like, oh, that's where their blood is closer to the surface. Even though, I mean, you could argue they don't have blood, but
right.
It's more about the illusion of it being the illusion of a realistic creature as opposed to. And the other thing he taught me again by osmosis was don't have a lot of sculptors, and I'm not going to name names, but there's a lot of like very well known creature sculptors who make these perfectly symmetrical sculpts.
Right.
And they're great if you're going to do a museum piece,
right.
but they don't look like it walked out of a barn.
Yep.
Phil stuff, there was a little asymmetry. There was a little like corner of the mouth was. It looked like it literally was just driven out or walked out of a barn.
Right.
And that was a skill he had from looking at real things. He
right.
did not.
Because real life is not perfectly symmetrical.
Exactly. Right.
Because of what happens to a creature as it lives.
And a lot of sculptors kind of have, they do and they're measuring with calipers and they do these beautiful sculpts, which are beautiful sculptures, but and there's nothing wrong with that. But they're more like a museum piece, like a Brancusi or a marble piece. Whereas he's doing things that look like a beat up monster or creature.
Right.
And that. So those are the things I learned from him.
And that's also the danger of working digitally.
Because
it is a crutch because it lets
you do
everything symmetrical all the time.
Yeah.
And you need to go in and you need to screw that thing up.
You got to beat it up. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think Weta's become really good at that.
Absolutely.
Whoever the guys, they get that more than a lot of other shops. And they have really, I mean, all these companies, they live and die by their art departments, their designers,
Yeah.
and that's why ILM was so good for so long.
Yep.
Starting with Joe Johnston and Nilo Rodis and those guys, they had a great art department. So there's a visual style there that drives the effects,
Right.
and Weta doubled down on that because Peter Jackson appreciates artists.
Yep.
He buys Frazettas. He gets where same with Guillermo del Toro, like
Hmm.
these directors who are artists and art fans. They both. I mean, Peter and Guillermo were artists.
Right.
Jim Cameron was an artist. He
Yep.
drew an amazing artist. I've
Yep.
seen his artwork. Holy crap! Uh, and so they have an appreciation for the art, and they know what good art is, and they hire good artists, and that comes out through their pictures. And a lot of directors and even effects houses kind of think artists, visual artists, just concept designers, are sort of like, yeah, that's the cherry on top. We need good,
Right.
programmers or good modelers, and you definitely do. But to me, they drive the train. They're not the icing on the cake. They are the
Right.
cake.
Right.
The rendering is the icing on the cake. That's why Phil was on Jurassic Park. Like
Sure.
he did the DID and realized they don't need that. We can do that, but he still was there to make them look like they were real, not
Well,
raw.
and that was a great thing that Dennis Muren did when he realized, oh, we're going all digital on these. He realized that Phil's expertise and his crew were
Right,
important to bridge this gap,
right.
and so
Because
that's
they
why
knew how to make
they came up with the animation Waldos that they could
right.
input the animation into.
They ended up not using that much, to be honest. They ended up
Well,
just doing right,
yeah, but
but it
still,
was also the texturing and everything. Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. Um, but
So
that's artists are always uh, either treated really well or really badly,
I
and
would
it's usually
say
a combination of both.
I would say 90% of our business is really poorly. I think artists. Bill Stout is a good friend, and he's an
Yeah,
amazing artist. Came up through the underground comics world, became a production designer for the He-Man, the first He-Man Master
sure,
Universe, and more famously for a Return of the Living Dead,
right,
where he designed a bunch of stuff. But he was the first guy to fight the studio, saying, "No, I keep my original art.
yeah, yeah,
You can buy it from me.
right.
I'm doing the design. You own the design. You don't
You own
own
the
the art."
design, you don't know own the art. Yep,
Right.
yep, yep, yep.
Yeah, and then Drew Struzan and even doing posters, same thing.
Right, yep.
Bill fought really hard because it used to be like, well, yeah, we're paying you, so we own your drawings. No, no,
Yeah,
no.
no, no.
You own that. I'm designing.
Yeah,
If I was doing your poster art, then maybe you're buying
right.
that. But then Drew took it even further, like, no, you're buying the right to print this, but I own the original.
It's interesting. I talked to Bill Stout a couple of years ago at Wonderfest,
Yeah,
and he was a dear friend of Ron Cobb's,
yeah,
and because he worked on Conan the Barbarian with him,
yes. Oh, exactly.
and we had a long talk about Ron and about these things that we were talking about, and it was such a great thing to connect with him on that level
Well,
because
yeah,
Bill
and Bill
Stout
did
is an amazing artist.
amazing artist, a lovely human being, an
Yeah,
artist champion in the entertainment industry because a lot
absolutely.
of artists like Gerald Brom is a friend who's an amazing illustrator, and
Hmm.
I think people steal from him more than they hire him
Sure.
to use his. They just buy his book and go make it look like that.
Yeah.
In fact, with AI, you can probably go Gerald Brom looking, design, but you know, it's a difference from doing the
Strong
stuff.
as Brahms, strong in his mountain.
Um, but there's amazing designers out there that movies rip off.
Yeah.
Jim Cameron, did he find? I remember the lawsuit with Roger Dean for the
Uh, oh, right.
Pandora,
Yeah, the floating
the floating
rocks.
islands, which everyone went, "Holy shit, that's right out of Roger
Yeah.
Dean." Yes, album covers. I don't know if they paid him or something, but everyone, at least I think he in print said, "No, this was definitely inspired by the
Yeah.
Roger
Yeah.
Dean album cover art." If anyone, so we're going back into artists from the '60s and '70s. Roger Dean, there's a couple books out of Roger Dean's artwork, and he did
Hmm.
a lot of Yes, the band. Yeah, he did their logo,
Yep.
and one of the early airbrush artists using in inks, what was the name of that guy's inks? It was like Dr. So and so's inks, and they were really, really saturated
Right.
inks. Airbrush, amazing artist, but a lot of games and movies ripped him off.
Absolutely.
Literally, if you look at some Roger Dean art and you're like, holy, that is Pandora, even with the
Yeah.
flying pterodactyl,
Yep.
like the
Yeah.
Ikron. And so hopefully he got some money because
Hope so. Yeah.
they literally, well, like Conan, used liberally from Frank Frazetta.
Well, sure.
I mean, everybody. I mean, it's funny. There's illustrator Brian Froud,
Yeah.
basically Jim Henson, but Jim Henson, being a guy who appreciates artists,
Yeah.
just said, "I'm going to hire you to design this movie. I'm going to rip you off. I'm going to get some, movie illustrators to do your look." No, he said, "I want to hire you to design this whole movie." Because Jim, and again, like Cameron, those guys know good art, and they hire like Peter Jackson's art department with what's his name, Alan Howe, and
Yeah.
what's his
Alan
name?
Lee
Alan Lee,
and John Howe.
John Howe. Yeah, sorry, Alan Lee and John Howe. Amazing, like Tolkien illustrators, and he just said, "No, I'm hiring you to design my movie,"
Yeah.
which is why everyone goes, "Oh my god, that looks amazing."
That's right.
Because
It's
he
because
hired good artists.
he hired the artists who had been working in that genre forever.
Yeah. So as your mentors on your podcast, I think Darren and I would both say, learn what good art is. Go buy art books. Go online, and get a sense of taste. So when you do a project, whatever it is, you'll know. They said amateurs imitate professional steel, but you'll know what a good look is for any world.
And that's the main thing I think that I've learned from my mentors, is to be able to recognize something that is, quote, good and worthwhile.
Right.
And that is the main thing that they conveyed to me.
Taste.
Yeah.
Develop, and it's hard because you can't say, "Oh, this is good taste." I mean, you could say Frank Frazetta is an amazing artist, and it's really created an entire genre of fantasy art.
Mm-hmm.
But he also stood on the shoulders of Roy Krinkle and
absolutely
Al Williamson. Kind of, they were the same. But was Krinkle, and who's the other guy he took liberally from? I can't remember, but you absorb what's around you and what you like, and then you become an artist, on your own. Like Bill Stout, same thing. Like he grew up with Frazetta, and he grew up with Krinkle, and all those guys, and he kind of spit it out and has his own style. But it's definitely a step. You can see the relation. You can see the connections and the relationships.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of. I mean, Cameron is a good artist on his own, so a lot of his stuff, he comes in with an idea and probably draws it out and works with his team.
Or at least he used to. I don't know how it works.
Yeah, nowadays, everything's gone digital, so you can kind of just go on the internet and, with AI, you can go and make this look like a Ron Cobb spaceship, and it'll probably spew out Ron Cobb. If you give it enough info, give good Ron Cobb drawings, it'll spit out something that looks like a Ron Cobb spaceship as opposed to a Sid Mead spaceship.
Right.
No, it's
interesting.
I'm not throwing shade at Sid Mead. I'm just saying they're different.
Yeah, no.
John Berkey does.
John Berkey has these amazing. John Berkey is sort of in the middle between Cobb and Sid Mead.
Yeah,
he has technical designs that have these strange shapes
that look impossible.
Because they kind of are.
They kind of are, and it's funny when I was
working. What's magical about them?
Joe Johnston. I think it was Joe or George Jensen. I was talking to them like, what's a good storyboard art? Like, why they were both fans of Joe Kubert.
Yeah.
And I asked them, just shooting the shit with them, like lunchtime up in the art. I would just go up there on my lunch and just hang out with the guys. And like, why do you like Joe Kubert? Like, his stuff's pretty loose. And they go, and it was either Joe or George who said he was a master of indication. I go, what do you mean? They go, he could create the illusion of something with 3 or 4 lines where other people would and I know what he meant by
overwork
it. And so again, a storyboard artist, you got to crank out 30, 40 boards in a day. You can't be drawing you can't be doing a Jean Giraud Mobius,
right?
You
have to convey as much information in as little lines as possible.
And as little space as possible.
Yeah.
So that becoming a master of indication, which is sort of visual shorthand. And you would see, Joe and George and Milo would do these boards, and there's an X-wing and there's the Death Star in here, but it's basically, here's some black marker and we flicked some paint on it.
And there's a dynamism and a energy to it. Yeah. That all of them had. I mean, I worked with George Jensen on Master and Commander, and he was amazing. And like I said, I think I said even last week that
Yeah, yeah.
he upped my game
Yeah.
amazingly.
Now, as a board artist, or just in general, drawing in general?
Just we were both doing key art. I mean, keyframe
I got you. Right.
art.
Like, yeah.
So I was just watching him just
Wow.
sit there with his pencils, and I had already been doing digital stuff by that time,
Yeah, yeah.
but I completely went all pencils on that
Wow.
movie, and it was
Colored
great.
pencil or just graphite, just black and
No, just barrel 314s, the
white?
red
Yeah. Nice.
the red pencils that are amazing.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny because Ralph McQuarrie
Hmm.
on the first Star Wars was doing concept art.
Yeah.
On Empire Jedi, he was doing he was taking frames from the movie and repainting them.
Yes,
Because
especially
again,
on Jedi. Yeah.
well, Jedi, absolutely. Like, I don't think I think he did like 3 paintings before he started filming to
Yep.
here's some ideas, and then everything else was like, what's the model look like? Okay, I'm going to paint that, and
Right.
it was to
Right.
sell the the
Yeah.
artworks.
Yeah.
But he was a lovely guy. But he was an amazing concept artist. I mean, yeah,
Amazing.
yeah,
Yeah. And
and
I love his pencil sketches so much more than I do his paintings, because
yeah.
his
Well,
pencil sketches had such energy in them
right,
that would get
right.
lost during the painting.
Well, his paintings were that classic gouache, kind of flat,
Yeah,
very art center from the 50s,
absolutely.
60s.
Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, they were great, but they kind of died where his drawings had so much life to them.
energy. Yep.
He was
Yep.
another
Yep.
sweetheart. I was just socially friends, so I never worked with him.
I
He was
only got to meet him one time, but
he was
he was
one of
very
the most
delightful.
soft spoken
Yeah.
people.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
He was almost like he had the aura about him of a like a priest, and just
Yeah.
very quiet and like, oh, that's lovely, very genteel. Lovely guy, and was around the whole Lucasfilm thing during Jedi, and
Yeah.
come in and show us the paintings. But at that point, he was kind of painting what we'd already shot or what we were going to shoot. Uh, I remember we designed all the creatures, and then he just started putting them in his paintings, as opposed to designing, early
Right.
designs. I don't know if he ever did designs on Jedi for like Jabba and stuff. He might have. I think he might have done early before I was there,
Mm.
like in 1980 or 79 when they were talking about doing it. But I think he did some. I think he had the Jawas where his face is all melty and droopy, like it was
Right.
early. But one thing too about all these people we're talking about, even Jerry Jewell and Jim Henson,
Yeah.
and maybe not Cameron, but they're all very genteel, very unassuming, so not ego driven. They had egos because you
Right.
have to have some sense of like, I'm doing
Yeah.
this.
Or else you'll be destroyed in the industry.
Right. You have to get a thick skin. That's the one thing I tell everybody. This industry, if you don't have a thick skin, you will either you will kill yourself or try and kill people you assume
Right.
you think are your enemies, and they're not. They're just trying to make a living too.
Well, they
Um,
might be your enemy, to be fair.
well, yes, but if you look at everyone as yeah, I just can't have that mindset. I know people who do. Is like, if they're not helping you, then they're your enemy.
Yeah.
If they're going for the same job you are, they're your enemy. It's like, well, I can't do every job in the world, so somebody's got to do the other ones.
Yes, you can.
I can't. I just don't have the look at my hair. Look how tired my hair is.
You're looking like what, Wild Bill Hickok.
I know. Well, I'm getting back into dude territory. I just gotta. Well, hey man, hold on.
The dude's
I'm
out
telling you,
there.
Walter.
I take.
Jeff Bridges now. Jeff Bridges now sounds like he had a stroke or something. He's got that kind of mushy. Well, hey man, I mean, what I'm doing. It's weird. I mean, really, when you look at
No,
his
he has, and he always has. We're going off on a tangent, but who gives a damn?
it's our goddamn
He
show.
always had that feeling as if he was talking around his teeth. And
But since True Grit, it's gotten worse, man.
Yeah.
He's really kind of like, I was like, did he have jaw cancer? Or did he have dental work done? Because it's really like a much more slushy kind of thing that's going on.
Yeah.
I know he had some medical things. I'm not throwing shade. I love Jeff Bridges.
No, of course not.
But yeah, his voice changed, man. And it's got like a lot more gravelly. I mean, look, my voice now.
New information has come to light, man.
Come to light, man. Yeah.
But Leonard also did the same thing.
Yeah.
Leonard had what do they call it? Laminates for Star Trek: The Motion Picture.
Yeah.
And you can hear the difference in his voice because he's talking around the laminates. He's not used to these teeth
those
yet.
perfect chiclet teeth.
Yeah.
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 I do not. I have perfect chiclet armpits.
Nice.
Yeah.
Good. Chicle.
Chicle.
That's that's Spanish for gum. Do you know that?
No.
Yeah.
What's gum in German? Gumme. I don't know. Probably. In England, gum is an eraser,
Yes.
which was always weird to me. Do you have a gum? I'm like,
You have a gum.
do you have a
Or
gum?
no, a rubber.
Rubber. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the other thing. Yeah, rubber. But they also call it a gum or
Yeah.
gum rubber or something.
A
Yeah.
gum rubber.
Anyway, we've tangentialized.
No, you know what?
Okay.
Working. You reminded me of other things. Working with
Yeah,
Les Dilly, who is a Brit, and he would have all these different names for things,
right.
and I didn't quite know how to translate him until months later. Um,
Ah,
if you're well, we were cutting sections of pipe to go on the deep core, right?
mhm.
And he would say, well, we need a bunch of cheese pieces in here. What? Cheese pieces? He meant wedges,
Oh, sure.
wedges to make
Right.
the curve. Uh,
Right.
and he would also oh, see,
Spanner was the one I learned when I was in
yeah,
England.
a spanner.
You have oh, Matt, you go spanner. I'm like, I
A
don't know
what?
what. A what? It's a wrench.
Yeah,
They call it a spanner, and I don't like a cheese piece. Kind of conceptually makes
right.
sense. Spanner. Why is
And
it a
also
spanner?
the desk lamps were called an anglepoise.
Angle. Oh wow, that one I've
Yeah,
never heard. Angle poise. Nice.
but
Did
it
they have
was
a name for a compass and protractor, or was that the same?
I never asked,
Uh,
but it was fascinating. Look, there was another there we had another art director on The Abyss named Peter Childs, who I didn't realize at the time, but he was the draftsman on Star Wars who drew R2D2.
oh
He
wow.
designed R2D2 on the drafting table, and if I had
Wow.
known that, I would have gone insane. But he was also, this kindness of accepting someone who is coming up and being interested in them enough to
Right.
pay them attention and not say, "Get out of here, kid! You bother me."
Have you had? I've a couple times in my life have people said, "I will be your apprentice. I'll be your assistant." Is usually what they say, and I'm like, I don't have a job that I can't
Only
afford.
only pretty girls, and unfortunately, my answer is the same. I don't have a job to give you.
I never get pretty girl. I had one pretty girl say, I will be your assistant on a Muppet thing if you have one. And
Right.
I had the Muppet movie, and we were already friends. She wasn't just some girl I met. But I got Muppet Haunted Mansion. And I said, all right, I got a job. You said, so she came, she slept in my guest room, and she was my assistant. She had very little to do. I mean, it was, she'd get me Diet Cokes and, like, get me if there was
Well,
a
that's
mess.
a job in itself.
Yeah. But yeah, that's the only time an attractive woman ever offered to be my assistant. But most of the time, I get people like, "Oh, I love the Muppets. I love what you
Yeah.
do." And like, can I be your assistant? I'm like,
You
I
gotta
really,
really love the Muppets. Oh, I
yeah,
really
no,
love the
you
Muppets. No, no,
have to
no.
be at my
You
house.
gotta really love the Muppets.
You like do my laundry, and like I
Yeah.
don't have, I think they assume that I go to a studio every day, and like,
Yeah.
like, here's my ideas. I was like, I just sit at home in this messy room and stare at the screen. So mentoring, as all the people who mentored us, which I was kind of getting to the beginning, like I don't even know if it's possible anymore because there's not a
Yeah.
job that you do for like 10 years where you can
Yeah.
mentor
No,
somebody.
that's the thing. I mean, I've been lucky to have taught at a couple
So,
major design colleges, at
yeah,
Art Center College of Design in Pasadena, and College for Creative Studies in Detroit. Uh, you know, by long distance.
yeah,
Um, but so I've had the opportunity of being able to at least give my outlook to students and to basically try and convince them not to do this. You know, if if I can convince you not to do this, then you shouldn't be doing it.
it's funny. I think I've said this in one of our earliest when we're talking about my career. When I went up to ILM, I was 18 at the time
Yeah.
and interviewed for the job as a creature shop technician, and it was Ken Ralston and Chris Wayless.
Hmm.
And they gave me a tour, and then they took me out to lunch, and they were like, literally, like, "You're an idiot. Wait, you
Yeah.
could go to UCLA. Your parents would pay for you to." I said, "Yeah, I'd have to live at home, but I could go." Are you kidding? don't be an idiot. This sucks. You're working with horrible chemicals. It's terrible hours. No one gives a crap about you.
Yeah.
And whatever you do is going to get ruined on set anyway. I mean, it's just throwing all this negativity.
If you die pouring foam, no one's going to give a shit.
No one's gonna. Yes, exactly. and I was just kind of laughing. I remember just kind of like, you guys, and they're like, "We're serious. Don't be an idiot. Don't take this job.
Don't go in there."
Yeah, and I was like, "You guys, you guys."
Oh.
And I remember 25 years later, 30 years later, with Chris Wallace, and we became best friends.
Yeah.
We still are. And I said, "Oh man, I didn't get it at the time. I thought you guys were being funny." And he said, "Well, we were seeing if you really wanted it."
Yeah.
And I said, "Oh yeah, I would have paid them if I had any money."
Yeah.
And he said, "But also, we weren't kidding. Like, it's a terrible business, and it is a terrible business.
Yeah.
But I mean, so is selling cars. Like, what's a business everyone goes, this is the best? I mean, maybe being a stripper or something. I don't know. The guy who, the I don't know what job everyone goes, this is the best job in the world."
Yeah,
I don't know.
There is no best job in the world. That's why they call it a job.
Yes, exactly. I mean, if you're a trust fund kid and you walk into writing or directing like some of the people who are writing and directing in our industry are right now, that's probably the greatest job in the world for them because they didn't really earn it. And I'm not saying they don't have talent, but they just kind of walked into it because their fathers or mothers taught them what they know, and then
everyone has problems that they have to overcome.
Sure, and some
people have more problems than others.
Well, yeah, we're talking about Max Landis today. I'm not telling any tales out of school, but he notoriously train wrecked himself by being kind of a big jerk, and I guess he got me too multiple times. And and he was a talented kid. The movie he did about the kids who developed superpowers who could fly, I thought it was great. And he wrote a couple other things. He was like the new Tarantino, writing these great crazy scripts, but then he torpedoed himself. But anyway, back to the point about mentoring. I don't know if it's possible anymore. I don't know where, except for teaching, like you said, where Art Center, they get people who've done it for a living who kind of go, well, here's the ins and outs. And, the worst thing, the last thing you want to hear from your teacher is don't do this.
Right.
But then my question as a student, because I'd be like, well, then what should I do? Because this is what I want to do. It's like, I don't know.
I don't know. I can't do anything else.
Yeah. I mean, that's the problem. The end of the film industry right now is sort of collapsing in on itself. I'm sure something will come out of it, whether it's YouTube and everyone suddenly, I mean, that's the thing. Look, being a director doesn't mean shit anymore because every kid with an iPhone comes out.
Yeah, that's great. Our busboy Tommy is a director.
Yeah, they've all shot, and I'm not wrong. They learned about cameras and lenses and all that, and they know how to edit. Like, I didn't have that. I mean, I was cutting little pieces of film together, just barely. Right. So the tools, the democratization of linear visual entertainment is complete. Like, anyone you don't even need an iPhone. You can shoot it on your computer, whatever. It's totally available to anybody. And the whole thing about, like, what does being a director mean anymore? 90% of the time, you're just kind of doing the grunt work that the producers and writers don't want to do, like dealing with the actors, dealing with camera. Where
but
like,
like with anything, like in the the Pixar movie about the superheroes.
Oh, Incredibles.
The Incredibles. If everyone is a superhero, no one is a superhero.
Well, and that's kind of where everyone's a director now. If you want to be,
that's exactly what I mean.
And so, which is fine. But TV directing, like, where you're on a schedule and a budget and you're dealing, I think the thing that you can't really teach is how to deal with three different actors with three different acting techniques, which I shared the anecdote about Dave Fincher working with Robert Downey and Jake Gyllenhaal on Zodiac. And the completely different acting styles, and he wanted to shoot these very fancy cameras as Dave was wont to do. And I said, you had to shoot in singles. He's like, yes, because they couldn't remember their line. They were doing just two different acting styles.
Yeah,
and and crew members like DPs. I've had DPs who are like, well, here's how we're going to do it. I'm like, well, I kind of want to get that. No, trust me, this is better. And this was early in it was my first, actually, when I got my DGA card was Muppets from Space, because I was doing second unit, and I had this very feisty Israeli DP who was a good DP, but he knew it was my first thing, and he'd go, oh, okay, what are we doing? Okay, I gotta do it. And I was like, okay, but we need to. He's like, no, 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 trust me. So he did that a couple times, and then, and I don't want to fight with him. I'm just saying, but this is what, this is what we're trying to do. So I let him completely set up this huge, complicated thing, which was not going to work because he wouldn't listen to me. But I was
Right.
like, all right, I'm going to let you hang yourself. So he got it all done. It took like an hour and a half. I said, great, okay, but they're coming in from the other side of the set. And he's like, what? I said, they're coming in from this way. And he's like, but it's. I said, I know, but you didn't want to
You
hear
didn't
from me.
listen. Yeah.
You didn't want to listen to me. So
Yeah.
he goes, are you fucking with me? I'm like, no.
No.
Go talk to the editor. We need him coming in this one. He's like, okay. So after that, he would at least listen to me because
Right.
I'm like, dude, I'm not stupid.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna So that's the other thing, that working with completely disparate personalities.
Yes.
That's why directors, Joe Dante used the same DP over, John
Sure.
Hora, and
Yep.
they're, use the same actors, because once you kind of find people like get your mojo,
Once
whatever it
you
is,
find people you can trust, you hold on to them
and
dearly.
and yeah, don't hate you or not trying to,
Yeah. Yeah.
use you to get their next job. Yeah, you kind of create a coterie of artists that can work together, which is the greatest joy in the world. The best thing, I mean, Jim Henson said, the best thing in the world is working with a bunch of people, making something fun and having fun creating stuff.
Yeah.
And it's rare that you see that now, because giant corporations have taken it all over and don't want that.
Right.
They don't want to have the director to have, unless you've made a movie that made $1 billion, like a Jim Cameron or a, Ridley Scott. They don't want you to, because you can tell them where to go stick it.
Yeah.
They want you to do. So that's what I mean. Being a director now, the most fun you're ever going to have is probably shooting your student films,
Right.
because everything else, until you make a movie that makes, I mean, David Fincher, even with all his hits, they weren't huge financial hits,
Right.
but he was considered a critic's darling. So
Right.
they would give him, he didn't getting $100 million. I mean, at this point now, but I think Fight Club was $30 million
Yeah.
or something, and they were always, tightening the purse strings and making sure, because his movies were not big release hits. They were good. They did well on. I think Fight Club now is like the number one selling DVD of all time, or something.
Interesting.
Yeah, or
Yeah.
stream.
No. Mentioning about the only time you can have fun is doing your student projects.
Right.
That is related to what I used to tell my students, and that is enjoy your time here, because this is the last time that anyone's going to give a shit about you.
Yeah.
And last time anyone is going to care what you do and care that you are successful.
Right.
Because after you leave, that's all gone, and it's
Yeah.
just on you.
90% of the time, it's going to be people who have no business telling you what to do or how to do it. We'll be
Yep,
telling you what to do and how to do it. I mean,
that's correct.
it's a lot of communications majors who went to Harvard, or guys who had a business degree and decided they wanted to be creatives and run a TV
But that's
studio.
fine. That's the nature of things, and you have to learn how to
Sure.
deal with people like that.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
You can't go, you're a fucking idiot. You couldn't
Yeah.
tell the difference between
No.
a teal green and a forest green.
Yeah.
And they're like, I don't give a shit, pal.
All right.
Yeah.
Then you're gone, and you
Yeah.
get to worry about these things in the comfort of your own home.
Unless you're Ridley Scott or David Fincher or Jim Cameron.
Yeah, but they've spent years dealing with the bullshit to come to the position that they're in.
Well, and all it is they made a movie that made a lot of money. Or I will say, in Fincher's case, they made movies that got a lot of respect and critical acclaim, because he was not making blockbusters until, I think, Social Network.
Right.
The first one that broke $100 million on release. Now his
Yeah.
DVDs and everything, but
long term.
He was not the blockbuster guy. He wasn't,
right.
Gore Verbinski. And I was just talking with somebody who did 4 movies with Gore Verbinski.
Yeah.
And he, Gore's a character, and I loved his pirate movies. He said, but the more successful he got, the less he would listen to other people. And then finally he did the Lone Ranger, and you're like, what happened? He said nobody said him no. Nobody told him no. He thought every idea I have is going to be great.
Yeah.
And we talked
that's
about
the thing. If you get stuck in the bubble and you can't get people that you trust to help guide you, then you're out of luck.
So that's that weird thing. So it's a very narrow path to thread, where you make successful things, but you don't get big-headed enough. And it's interesting. And big-headed is not the right word, because like Peter Jackson, I think, kind of blew up after Lord of the Rings series.
Yeah.
But I think, he had his wife.
You're right.
To, if you look at The Frighteners,
Right.
And you're like, oh, that's a fun movie, but how did this guy make Lord of the Rings? It's because his wife and their writing partner, I forget what her name was.
Yeah.
Like they
Fran.
were, and he
Fran
listened.
and Philippa.
Yeah, Philippa. Yes, Fran was his wife, or is
Yeah.
his wife.
Yes.
And he had someone to say, this is not. Don't go crazy here. I mean, you look at his director's cut, and you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay.
And then Joe Dante, like on Small Soldiers. Well, Gremlins 2 was Joe Dante kind of given
Unleashed.
the Unleashed. And I look, I worked on it. It was fun.
Yeah.
I think it's a huge romp, and it's a lot of fun. But then Small Soldiers, like his best movie in my mind, and Joe's a friend. I wouldn't say we're close, but we're acquaintances and friends. But when I saw Inner Space
is a lot of fun. Yeah.
I walked out. I said, this is the best movie you've ever made. It has everything. It was funny, adventure, great talent. Bob Picardo's amazing in it. Great. And it was killed by a bad ad campaign.
Right.
The ad campaign was a finger holding a glowing booger. And it said Inner Space, and nobody knew what the hell it was about.
What it was.
People thought it was like a psychological. They didn't know what it was.
Plus, it has a guest starring role of John Hora.
That's right. As the scientist,
the production, right. the DP.
DP of the Gremlins movies.
Yeah.
Johnny Hora. Oh, he was.
I think he passed away.
He did. Yeah. He was a character, man. He's like a big old hippie.
He was our DP on Honey, I Blew Up the Kid.
Yes, that's right. Wait, was that was Randall Kleiser?
Yep.
Yeah. I know. I met Randall. I know his brother Jeff really well.
Yeah. Jeff is the guy who does visual effects, and
a lot
Randall, of course, directed Grease and
that's what put it on the
Flight
map.
of the Navigator, which is one of my favorites.
But
he's great, and that's where I met Ed Verrill. Yeah.
Nice.
So it all comes back.
It all comes back to mentors and mental patience.
Indeed. And I didn't even mention Mentor Hubner, who is literally a mentor.
Really? You got to? I got
to work with him on one show.
What show was it?
It was Junior, the Arnold Schwarzenegger is pregnant movie.
So he had storyboarded Cat's Eye before I came in on it. His boards were like charcoal paintings.
Yeah.
They were stunning.
Exquisite.
Yes. I mean, he was. Did you ever see? Wasn't he the one that did a lot of production art for Fiddler on the Roof?
Yeah.
Amazing charcoal. Yeah. They were like charcoal paintings. They call them a storyboard is doing a disservice.
Yeah.
So he did I guess Dino brought him in early because I storyboarded the bulk of the movie, but he had done this, and I was like, oh my god, I have to compete with this.
Yeah. Right.
No. Yeah, he was more like mood boards,
Yeah.
But he storyboarded a couple sequences. But oh my god, Mentor Hubner.
Yeah.
He was one of the last of the old school guys who
absolutely
were trained in art college, drawing nudes, and he could oil paint, and he would do these. Again, another guy look up. Oh man, his storyboards could all be framed and put in a museum. They were just stunning, and they were just on newsprint, just black. Yeah, amazing stuff. Well, there you go.
Well, this has been a fun romp through.
Thank you. Those are good suggestions, mentors.
Great people we've known.
Yes.
And I count you as one of them now.
Oh, you're very kind. Well, and vice versa.
Well,
look at us.
Thanks. Look at
weirded Beardos.
Here we are, face to face, a couple of silver spoons.
All right. Well, thank you for listening to Darren and his nonsense.
Yeah, and my nonsense and my goofy idea of talking with Kirk every week.
I just read my byline, Beardo as well.
Yes.
For those of you who are only listening, Darren's name underneath says Beardo, and mine says Kirk Thatcher, Beardo as well. So
yes.
I think that should be my BAW.
Put that on your business card.
Put that in your fucking mic. All right.
All righty.
This has been our pleasure.
We'll see you next time. We're going to have a guest next time, so join us. I'm not saying who it is.
I am. It's
The Weirded Beardos are Kirk Thatcher and Darren Doctorman. Email them at theweirdedbeardos@gmail.com.